the Casa Grande. That's an interesting echo. Sorry. Call to order the regular meeting for the Planning and Zoning Commission for Thursday, August 6th. Would everybody please stand for the pledge?
Want me to go turn it?
I pledge allegiance of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with
liberty and justice for all.
That's nice. It's a new trick. Throwing our voices around here through speakers. Oh, was it? Okay. All right. Linda, would you go ahead and call the roll?
Yes. Member Benedict?
Here.
Member Estrada?
Here.
Member Snyder? Member Dugan?
Here.
Member Tucker?
Here.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Here.
Chairman Miller?
Here. Awesome. Director, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. All right, so real quick before we jump in, I will, just in case everybody's wondering, so our former member Tammy Anderson retired her position, and so at this time I'd love to welcome back Mr. Benedict, who has been with us before and excited to have you back again and joining in.
Fun to hear.
Way to continue to be a public servant, right?
Yeah, you bet. Sure.
All right.
Sure. Long as y'all have me.
There you go. All right, and with that, did everybody get a chance to review the minutes from last meeting?
We didn't have minutes, sir.
No minutes.
No,
Mr. Chairman, I move
Okay.
to accept the minutes from last meeting.
there's no minutes.
There are no minutes.
There's no minutes.
The minutes haven't been completed yet, so we're gonna have to.
So we will
approve them.
table.
That till next meeting, yes.
Motion to table.
Move that we table the minutes of the last meeting.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Perfect. So, before we jump into the full section of the agenda, I'll just go through kind of our normal routine. It'll be a little bit tweaked, obviously, with adding the Zoom. As we all know, in the environment that we're in today, technology is a blessing, but also takes some adjustments. And so, with that, staff will take a few minutes to present the agenda item. From there, the commission will get the opportunity to ask any questions of staff. Once that's completed, we'll bring the applicant and or their representative forward to add any additional information, as well as field any questions from the commission. Once that's complete, we will open it up to the public. If there's anybody present, we will take them, and then we will also then move to anybody that is on electronically. From there, we will bring back the appropriate person to answer the question. So just to kind of streamline the process. So if you come up and you ask a question, we'll make note of it, and then we will either bring up the staff or the applicant to address that question. So that way we don't have back and forth going at the podium and or via Zoom. And so with that, we will go to the first agenda item. Public hearing consideration requested by CEI Engineering and Associates on behalf of CG6 LLC. And I believe we've got a couple of different agenda items that will be presented all together. Perfect.
Thank you, Chairman. This project involves 3 separate applications associated with the proposed Firestone. Could you advance the slide, please? Nope. So essentially what the project entails is a 6,262 square foot Firestone tire shop proposed just south of Florence Boulevard and just east of the existing Circle K there at the corner of Potabom and Florence Boulevard. They're proposing in that building 7 service bays. The building's proposed to be a height of 22 feet and 30 parking spaces are to be provided on the site. I do also want to point out that recently Planning Commission did approve a preliminary plat. Essentially what that preliminary plat proposes to do is widen the Circle K lot by 25 feet so that they can accommodate some additional parking that you see to the left of the drive aisle with the arrows. As part of the replat, it also does accommodate that drive aisle between the Circle K lot and the proposed Firestone lot. And the Firestone lot basically will share that drive access with the parking that you see for Circle K. There's 3 separate requests associated with the Firestone project, and I'll go through each application separately and their associated review criteria. This is essentially a repeat from last month because I did present, however, the item was tabled, and now there's a new commissioner and new audience, and there has been some updates. So bear with me because a lot of this may sound somewhat repetitive, but there are some updates as well. The first application that I would like to discuss is the conditional use permit. Now, a conditional use permit is required because in this area's zoning, B2, general business, tire sales and repair use is subject to the approval of a CUP. There's specific criteria that have to be evaluated in order to recommend support of a conditional use permit, and that's reflected in your staff report. But for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to talk about the 3 highlighted items. The first criteria that I want to discuss is that the site for the proposed use relates to the streets and highways adequate in width and pavement to accommodate for the quantity and kind of traffic generated by the proposed use. Firestone did submit a traffic impact statement that assessed how much daily trips that use would be generating, and it also did an evaluation of the level of service of the surrounding roadways and what impact it was going to have in terms of ingress and egress points. It was reviewed by the city traffic engineer, Dwayne Itel, who found that the impact was fairly minimal. A business such as Firestone does not generate a significant amount of traffic, and because they're proposing for its main ingress and egress to be utilizing an existing driveway that is currently just used by Circle K to the west, there wasn't an evaluation from the context of adding any additional access points, and that primary one onto Florence was determined to be adequate. However, as a result of the public notification and in discussing this project, there had been concern raised by Warren Funeral Services to the east, and they will have an opportunity to present their concern. But to summarize, the concern they have with regard to the traffic is that the driveway serving their site is older, and it was established well before the driveway for Circle K. When the Circle K went in and utilized that driveway, it was encumbering access to their site because there's only a 170-foot distance between the Circle K driveway that Firestone will also use and their driveway, and it creates quite a congestion issue, especially if there is the need for long queuing during funeral processions. Ideally, they would like to see a right turn lane to accommodate their driveway. However, the traffic generated by Firestone would not prompt that. And also, city traffic engineering didn't find that a 170-foot distance was sufficient for safe queuing. And he also didn't find that it would be safe to have one continual long right turn lane extending from the one that's already in existence to access Circle K. But in response to that concern, one of the updated conditions is with regard to the access onto Potabom. So currently, Firestone would have the ability to, instead of just simply using the driveway onto Florence, they do have the ability to use the driveway onto Potabom at Circle K, because there's a cross-access easement. But there's an additional condition stating that the access drive on the vacant lot shall be paved to connect to Sunrise Preschool. There's an existing drive access at Sunrise Preschool, and it was put in place to provide cross-access, particularly for the development to the south that has not yet occurred. And so it would just essentially be a little elbow piece that would be improved to provide some additional access points. Another criteria that I want to discuss is the proposed use will have no adverse effect on abutting property. When evaluating the potential impact to surrounding properties, one thing that I noticed was a benefit was that the site is planning perimeter landscaping. As you notice, highlighted in green is their landscaping areas, and they are accommodating for landscaping not only between the building and Florence Boulevard, but also a strip to the west of their building along that access drive, to the south, where their retention basin is, as well as about a 15.5-foot planting area between the Firestone building and their east property line. Also, the area of the most sensitivity is all areas to the east. And the reason is because as you're driving on Florence Boulevard west, you're going to come up to the site and it's going to be highly visual, or visible, I should say. And so there was attention paid to directing the view of the service bays, not within view as you're traveling from east to west, but rather it's oriented in such a way that it's facing another auto-dominant use, which is Circle K to the west, that has a gas station and car wash. It also is oriented in such a way where the garage bays aren't entirely within view from Florence. That's particularly additionally screened by the proposed landscaping between the building and the street. There is an additional condition placed on this particular application restricting outdoor repair that had been a stated concern from the last meeting. And so we have updated the conditional use permit resolution to restrict outdoor repair. And a lot of times it bears explaining that even though Firestone may not have that in their normal day-to-day operations, a conditional use permit typically runs with the land. So the reason for these conditions are so that if a future tire store comes into place, then this restriction would also be applicable. There's also an updated condition regarding outdoor storage. Originally, there was a condition that no outdoor storage would be allowed. However, it was brought to my attention that there is an area planned, a small area planned for outdoor storage, and it's associated with their dumpster enclosure, and I'll show you that in a moment. Staff feels that that outdoor storage area is very well screened, so well that I didn't even notice it on the site plan. So what we did is we modified the condition that outdoor storage must be screened, but it also would be subject to meeting applicable fire codes. And this is the area of the outdoor tire storage that I wanted to show you. So the trash enclosure is about 6 feet in height, and the tire storage area is just to the rear of where the refuge container actually goes, with the access door on its north elevation between the building and the trash enclosure. The other aspect of adverse impact and evaluating that is with regard to elevations. Now, that had been also a sensitive topic brought up by the adjacent property owner to the east. And I just want to do an overview of the elevations as proposed and a little bit of history of where we've come with them. So the north elevation as what you would see from Florence and the west elevation have basically remained the same through all the renditions. Firestone is planning to use a metal panel system in its architecture. They are providing 4 different colors. The metal panels are comprised of both vertical panels that you see where the garage bays are, and also horizontal panels that you see on the end caps of the building. And then also on the north elevation specifically, that's a metal panel system that's going horizontally to break up the design. What has changed over some revisions is the south and east elevations. So what was originally proposed and what you last saw was a south elevation that was vertical white panels, but the update provides for a strip of wainscoting at the bottom of gray horizontal panels, just to add some additional color and to break up that paneling system. Originally, what Planning Commission considered was an east elevation that had vertical paneling with about the first northerly 25 feet being gray colored, just to break up that monotony of a 130-foot long stretch of building. Staff had asked the applicant to consider ways to address that east elevation, because as I mentioned previously, when you're driving west on Florence, that elevation is very prominently within view, and so it does require some attention. Now, some things that help soften it is they are planting some trees between the building and the property line, and as you see on their updated east elevation, that's a view of when the trees reach maturity. But what they've also done on the updated, or at least there's yet another version, but I just want to talk about this fairly quickly. What was in your staff report was this version that you see on the bottom, where they were proposing a gray wainscoting that was also a horizontal panel compared to the vertical white panels. The downspouts were also proposed to go to gray as well. What was most recently received, and the applicant can talk about this in their part of the presentation, is they've updated it in hopes to help continue to meet the concerns about embellishing that elevation to add some more interest, visual interest. So a picture's worth 1,000 words, but just to point out the changes, what they've done with this version is they've wrapped the north elevation, which is presently comprised of horizontal gray panels, along to the side, the most northerly, about 25 feet. So now it does add a visual difference, because it now not only goes vertical but horizontal from the bottom of the elevation to the top. And the wainscoting is still there throughout the building, but they also provided a horizontal panel system towards the southerly 25 feet or so, just again to add some more color and visual interest. The applicant also provided some examples of other firestones that are being constructed. This is their new motif that they're going with this metal panel system. And I've numbered them just in case it questions and answers if you want to refer to a specific number. But essentially, picture number 3 would be similar to what the north elevation is. Picture number 2 would be very similar to what you'd see on the west elevation and also the north elevation. Picture number 1 is the west elevation. There's really not a clear example of other firestones that captures the back of the building, But picture number 4 is the closest of where you have that white vertical panel system. But what they're proposing is to instead wrap that horizontal paneling for a certain distance. Another criteria that I want to discuss is conformance with the general plan. This area is within the community center land use. And what is promoted in the community center land use is to bring buildings as close to the roadway as possible. Obviously, it still has to comply with the minimum required setbacks of the zone. But there's also an emphasis on minimizing views of parking areas and promoting walkability, while also still allowing those uses that are expected within those appropriate zone districts. They are providing walkability to the street by taking their private sidewalk and connecting it with the Florence Boulevard sidewalk. They have brought the building up to the 35-foot setback line from Florence. They're minimizing that view of auto dominance by not having the building oriented in such a way where you see the garage bays parallel with Florence. However, because we do promote walkability and we try to de-emphasize heavy vehicle travel, we recommend a condition limiting detached signage to monument style only. That's more appropriate for areas with slower speeds, and it's more eye-catching from a pedestrian scale. This monument style sign can have a maximum of 15 feet in height. And that's similar to the signage that you see along Florence, particularly immediately west and east of their property. So in conclusion with the conditional use permit part of this project, staff does recommend that Planning Commission approve this conditional use permit and its associated updated resolution with these following conditions that I've discussed. Now, the major site plan is the second of their 3 applications. Now, the major site plan specifically approves for the siting of the building and ensures that they're meeting all of the development standards, parking, drainage, etc. Much of the review criteria is similar to the review criteria for conditional use permits. So I'm not going to go over many of them. However, I do want to talk about the building location and height. They are basically complying with all of the required setbacks. And essentially, if the order of things would be that the conditional use permit to allow the use somewhat takes hierarchy to the major site plan, because without the conditional use permit, for that tire shop, then the site plan for the tire shop would be moot. But staff does recommend that Planning Commission approve the major site plan for Firestone with one condition. It's the same condition from the previous meeting. It's essentially a detail having to deal with their southerly retention pond, and it's a detail that can be worked out at the site development permit stage. It was just some missing information. The third application and last for this project is the final landscape plan. Now, typically, final landscape plans are administratively considered, but that's assuming that a preliminary landscape plan accompanied the major site plan submittal. In this case, they opted to skip the preliminary landscape plan, which they can do, but in those cases, the final landscape plan must be considered by Planning Commission. In evaluating the code criteria, they do meet and exceed the required number of trees and shrubs and landscape area. I do want to point out that along the east of the building, the area perhaps the most sensitive, they are accommodating for landscaping, and those particular trees are 24-inch box in size. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission approve the final landscape plan. Now, again, this is a continuation from the July 2nd meeting. Since that time, There have been some additional comments provided by Jackie Guthrie on behalf of Warren Funeral Services, and that has been provided to you this evening. The concerns remain to be that the shared driveway with Circle K and Firestone is too close to the Warren driveway. Too much traffic already exists on it, and so adding any more just further creates conflict with the Warren's older driveway. And there was also really not a lot of satisfaction with the east elevations. It basically, their concern is with a 130-foot long building that close to their access drive with minimal visual interest, it creates an alley effect. Staff recommends that Planning Commission approve the CUP subject to the conditions that I've discussed, and both in the staff report and this evening. And we recommend approval of the major site plan subject to one condition, and also we recommend approval of the final landscape plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Hey, one second. We've got,
No?
okay,
Well, okay, I'll go ahead.
Member Dugan?
Yes. Can you go back to the picture where you're showing the driveway from the daycare center and behind the Circle K there?
Yeah, I think would this help? This picture?
No, the one with the color, and you can show the driveways, where you're gonna put it, there we go. So that's on Circle K's property, that you're gonna put that drive-through there?
So currently, it's on the same property that Firestone, the same owner who's selling the land to Firestone owns the land where that access drive is. But ultimately, what's going to happen, Commissioner Dugan, is that this will be split up into a total of 3 lots. Circle K is lot 1.
Yep.
Firestone is another lot.
Yep.
And the lot is flagstem lot. So that drive access that you're seeing going north and south belongs technically to the lot to the south, but there's a cross-access easement allowing shared access.
So the traffic from Pontauban Road would go through the daycare center road, back
Yes.
into the other road?
Correct.
And they don't have a problem with that?
There's an existing cross-access easement, and it was installed there for anticipation of future development to the east.
Okay.
So with concern on traffic, one of the solutions was to add more traffic?
Commissioner Tucker, if I understand your point, you're saying that now
Yeah,
one of the consequences is that traffic may be increased on that driveway because now there's people that maybe be coming from the daycare parcel, for example.
Correct.
Are you gonna put a sign, because people wouldn't know to use that driveway, you gonna put a sign there by the daycare center that the access to Firestone is through that way? Otherwise, a lot of people will know they'll be going through Circle K all the time?
Well, Commissioner Dugan, I'm not certain what types of signage would be implemented. They can continue to use the driveway at Circle K, but maybe for wayfinding purposes to notify people that they also have an additional driveway to use. That's something that could be evaluated when they do their site development permit, because it would be basically just like an informational sign. And that can certainly be considered.
Yeah, because most people aren't gonna see that driveway over there until they used it, I guess, a couple times. So I just thinking there should be a sign and
Right.
with an arrow showing Firestone.
One of the effects of that driveway connecting right now is to satisfy a concern that we heard last month from Commissioner Snyder about emergency access. We do encourage and most times require, depending on the situation, for a secondary emergency access. And they were accommodating for that by the cross-access with Circle K. However, this provides an added benefit because an emergency vehicle doesn't necessarily have to navigate around a fuel island, et cetera. There's yet a third way for ingress and egress for emergency vehicles.
Okay, thank you.
Member Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gagliardi, this may be a question for Mr. Eitel as well. I'm concerned because in the documentation provided by Kimberly Horn, page 33 of the packet, it shows a lot of access in and out to the Firestone site through the Circle K parking lot, specifically routed between the fuel islands and the main building itself. And that really seems to me to be a safety hazard, because we all know that people will park in the island, take on fuel, and then walk to, and while they're doing that, somebody will be walking into the building to get fast food, snacks, beverages, whatever, and to set up a pattern whereby we are encouraging traffic to run from Potty Bomb into the Firestone site and out again using that route. It seems very, very dangerous to me, and I think I'd like to be reassured that that's not the case.
Commissioner Snyder, I point, and I'll have traffic engineer Dwayne Eitel comment. I will say that at the time that Circle K developed, we also had considered that at least an acceptable condition, because they were utilizing that driveway onto Florence on another property via an access easement. So there was that anticipation even at that time that there would be cross access. So this document from Kimberly Horn really just illustrates one possible circulation route. It doesn't show another likely route where east-west traffic may occur between the fuel island and the screen wall parallel to Florence Boulevard, which is a fairly wide area. But I do hear your concerns, particularly about people walking back and forth from their car into the convenience store. And I'd be happy to deflect to Mr. Eitel for further comment.
Well, thank you, Jim. I believe most people will use the portion of the Circle K driveway that's north of the fuel island. As you said, that is wide enough to go through there without any issues, or a great number of issues. The other thing to remember is there isn't very much traffic going to the tire store. Throughout the day, there's very few cars that would be going through there. So I really don't feel like it's a major issue. Now, if it was some other kind of store other than the Firestone store, a Walmart or something, and they were all going through there, I would agree that that would not be good. But I think in this case, with the smaller amount of traffic and that one lane is pretty wide, that we will be okay.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Eitel, I must confess I'm not particularly comforted. I know that when we discussed the Grande Express development in the Fry's Marketplace, there was discussion about traffic being from the takeout lanes being routed through the fuel island complex, and there was general agreement that was not a good thing. And when we talked about the convenience market at the corner of southwest corner of Canal and Cottonwood, there were similar discussions. I'm really concerned that we're institutionalizing conditions that are setting up potential dangers. And you may be right in terms of the numbers of cars or vehicles at this point, but we have to look forward. And it only takes one to make it a very bad thing.
But you know, it's not that unusual to drive through a parking lot to get where you're going. There's lots of shopping malls, big parking lots, people are driving through there, people are walking. This is
Would that
probably
were
less
true?
of an issue.
Would that were true?
Say that again.
We all know that we have had occasion to slam on the brakes or shake our heads and watch near accidents. That's all I'm saying.
Member McBride.
I have a follow-up question for Mr. Itel, basically. You say a small number of vehicles. What's the number compared, say, I know you don't have the figures for the other places that Mr. Snyder was talking about, compared to the Panda Express, how many trips they would make compared to how many trips is going to be into the Firestone, to give us a reference?
Well, the Firestone store has 180 trips a day. And I'm guessing the Panda Express has that many trips in an hour. So that's kind of those aren't exact figures, but give you an idea of the difference.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Let me,
Member Benedict.
let me pile on to that. If Mr. Attell has an idea of what the Circle K's daily trip count might be. Dwayne?
Well, I don't have an exact number. I'm looking through some stuff here to, it's definitely a lot more than the Firestone store.
Dwayne and Commissioner Benedict, I might want to direct you to page 32 of the staff report. There's some data. It doesn't specifically cite fuel station traffic, but it outlay the daily trips for tire store traffic and then has some other categories. I'm not certain where gas station would fall into that, but perhaps Mr. Itel has an idea of how many anticipated daily trips per day a fuel station has.
Do you have any idea how many pumps are there? We just take a guess.
14,
right.
Say there's
14?
10 fuel stations there.
Could be 14,
Okay.
20 something.
Dwayne, if it was 14,
That'd be about
There's
100
4 on
and
each one of the lines? Oh, you're a genius.
that would be in
I was counting 2.
125 at the peak hour.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
That'd be around 120. That would be around 125 trips peak hour.
on 10,
So it's definitely a lot more than the Firestone store.
250 with,
It's a lot more,
20.
so, yeah, so we're at,
Throw a convenience store on there, now we're talking about 300-400 an hour.
yeah, we're not at. Oh,
Did anyone do a site survey or take a look at what it looks like coming out of there, going west? Since it's a ride only, left in, a ride out? Because there's a continuous flow of traffic out
So
of
we-
Circle K making a ride onto Florence Boulevard that would be very detrimental to any other business going into that area as it sits today.
So we now have a traffic management center where we have capability of looking at the video at different intersections. And I spent a bunch of time yesterday watching this one. And yes, there's a lot of traffic, but other than occasionally the southbound left turn lane off of Florence backing up, I didn't really see any really huge issues in there.
And the intersection you're talking about is Potty Bomb?
Do we do
and
that?
Florence?
Right.
You're talking about Potty Bomb and
With
Florence.
the other access being a right in, right out, the one on the Florence Boulevard, that's that's kind of the perfect kind of driveway.
Any other question for staff?
I do, on the building itself, we had a bunch of comments and discussion on O'Reilly's when it went in, because they wanted a certain location. And I understand Firestone's actually going the direction that we wanted O'Reilly's to go. But there was concerns about the way that it looked on Florence Boulevard, Bush versus that and everything else. And I do kind of agree with the people next door when they're talking about you're getting a really industrial look on that one side of the building, regardless if you throw a couple extra colors on it or not. It's very big and long to do that. That kind of falls kind of what we were trying to alleviate with O'Reilly. Why are we not having any more discussion on the looks of it than we did with that?
Commissioner Tucker, primarily it's because O'Reilly existed in a PAD where there was additional architectural standards that is part and parcel with the zoning, and it gives ability to make more vigorous recommendations. Whereas this is in a B2 zone, whereas though we can ask for elevations and we can certainly evaluate it and offer guidance, my conversations with Firestone did entail the need to dress up that east elevation, but in the various renditions, this is where we're at with what they're proposing to do. The primary focus does tend to be on what elevation can be seen from the street, and typically that's, we would be just treating the north elevation with a lot of reverence, and I would say they are meeting that to a T, because the building's brought up closer to Florence than even O'Reilly is. We got O'Reilly to push the building somewhat, but not all the way to the goal. However, having said that, there is, in looking at it, there is a lot of need to evaluate at least the east elevation as well, since that's such a prominent view when traveling west.
And that's my point. It's basically the back of the building, which would generally be away from public view. That's going to be right in the public view.
Right.
The question is, that I would have though, is it right in the view once future development is on that empty lot?
And you
You
tell
put
me
an
that
office building right up against.
You own the property next door, and you're going to say that looks horrible until there's future development. So you're happy with that?
It's not my decision. I don't own the land and I'm not the land builder, so we're trying to tell him, hey, you can build this or you can't build that, but it's his land. So we're just trying to figure out, does it conform, right? And so we say, hey, this looks horrible, but there's also an empty lot sitting next to it. Does the empty lot look horrible? You gonna force the person that owns the empty lot to build something?
Well, then let's just put a bunch of towers in going down Florence Boulevard, 500 foot tall. We'll have great cell service.
Yeah,
As long as it
as long as it conforms to the city
As long as it
zoning
conforms,
codes.
exactly.
Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Hang on, hang on a second, Snyder. Mr. Benedict.
Can you go back to the landscape plan?
There you go.
I'm gonna be talking trees tonight, apparently. and had a little bit of discussion with Ms. Guthrie, and but I have a question. Maybe the question would better approach to her. And I need some education on one of them. But the question, I will ask that question when she's here. Do you though know how long it takes would take those trees that are going to be planted on that side, the large ones, to reach a size that's, the height of the building or?
Commissioner Benedict, sorry, you're sitting so
Yeah,
close
whatever.
to each other.
Either way, tell me which one.
The trees captured in those elevations at mature state would probably be 30 years, would be my guess. The applicant can counter me if I'm wrong, but it would take a while for them to reach that height.
Is there a city code of minimum box size on trees?
15 gallon.
And so they're exceeding that with the 24-inch box.
The trees are 24-inch box, not 15 gallons.
Correct. So that does help them grow. It puts them in a position to grow faster. And it's probably a much quicker time than the 30 to be full and providing a lot of prominence, but to the height that is shown would take, well over a couple decades would be my guess.
A good 10 years before it gets a fullness. Won't be fully grown, but.
Right.
Member Snyder, you had a question?
Yes, I did, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is somewhat started off as a piggyback to Commissioner Benedict's question. He anticipated part of mine. I'm not totally familiar with how tall a 24-inch box tree is to begin with. And so that would be my question, and I'm like Commissioner Benedict, I'm willing to wait for the applicant to ask that question. However, I am concerned about the elevations, and in particular the elevations for the back wall or the east-facing wall. Obviously, the planting of those trees is designed to mitigate the visual impact of a solid sheet of white metal strips. I'm appreciative of the fact that they've added some paneling and some architectural features to help minimize that. Are those elevations finalized? Are they set in stone, or are they just artistic renovations and thoughts?
Commissioner Snyder, so elevations are a requirement as part of the major site plan submittal. And so since these were provided with the intention to be the new proposed elevations, they would be, if approved, they would be required to build to these elevations provided to you this evening.
Okay.
I think.
Thank you for that clarification.
I'd say that does look way better than an entirely white wall.
Yes,
It does look way better.
much.
Any other questions for staff? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gagliardi. So at this time, I'd like to wipe down the podium, apparently. And then we will have the applicant and/or their representative come forward.
self-explanatory, but that
Perfect.
advances. The problem
Okay.
is sometimes it goes to sleep, so just cue Joe to
Okay.
pick it up.
Terrific. Good evening, everybody. I hope you can hear me okay. This is a first for me. Appreciate your time. My name is Tom Galvin with Rose Law Group. I'm here on behalf of the applicant. My address is 7144 East Stetson Drive in Scottsdale. Appreciate your time. I appreciate the ability and opportunity to make this presentation tonight. I think we're excited to show you, based on what you heard earlier tonight from staff, some of the new designs and answers that came up the last time that you heard this presentation on July 2nd. I'm going to begin by just showing you the overview of the site, and just to let you know that we appreciate staff for their input, and we also really appreciate Ms. Jackie Guthrie, who represents the funeral home, for her input as well. Everything you see here tonight in our presentation incorporates what we heard both from staff and what we heard from Ms. Guthrie on behalf of the funeral home. And we think that they had very good ideas, and everything that staff recommended is something that we consent to and we agree with. And all of the concerns that Ms. Guthrie had, we tried to address here tonight. As you can see, Firestone has a really good motif. I would consider this a modern version of what we would know as the tire stores growing up. These definitely don't look like the tire stores that I knew growing up. And as you can see, the site plan here is oriented in a way that city staff recommended. The building itself would only be about 12%. I'm sorry, did someone speak?
We got somebody jumping into the waiting room.
Okay. The building itself is only 12% of the...
Hang
Okay.
on.
Just let me know when I can go. The building itself is only 12% of the lot. Open space is 40% of the lot, and I think that's a really added benefit for any proposed use that's going to be directly in Florence Boulevard. When we consider the alternatives and the options for uses at this prime property in Florence Boulevard, for a site like this to have 40% open space, that's a huge development. Here is the first version. This is the version that was in the application that was presented to you just a month ago. And this is the version that Ms. Guthrie had taken issue with. This is the east elevation. And I just want to let you know that since then, we have had a multitude of conversations with her on the telephone. I myself have been a part of probably at least three phone conversations with Ms. Guthrie to hear her concerns. My colleague, Paul Basha, who is a traffic engineer, worked for the city of Scottsdale for many years, now works at Rose Law Group. He spoke to Ms. Guthrie on many occasions, at least 6 times. And he has known her for years, and he respects her, and he thinks of her very highly. He couldn't be here tonight, so hopefully, in my layman's way, I can kind of interpret what Mr. Basha had to say about traffic issues and about these elevation issues as well. But I just want to let you know that we had a lot of conversations with her, and for me particularly, I really wanted to address this question and concern she had about the east elevation. And members of this commission here tonight, you also raised very good questions about that east elevation and how it would affect the property to the east and the funeral home itself and using that driveway. As you can see here, we came back with a second version. I would call this color charcoal. That's the color that we're using. That's the color we described. And I think that's a color that's most apt to describe what you're going to see here. This is the second version that we presented to Ms. Guthrie. For her, it wasn't good enough, and we appreciated that, and we took that into serious consideration. I went back to my clients, and I said, what else can we do better? And I want to give them a lot of credit because they listened to critical feedback as well, and they worked really hard and went back to the drawing board, so to speak, and they came with this third and final version. And as you can see here, the east elevation is at least 50% of this charcoal. I know staff said earlier tonight that this is a white metal gate. Actually, it's actually an off-white. So I just want to make that subtle, but I think that's a very important distinction to make. Some commissioners tonight have spoken to the question about the visibility from Florence Boulevard. And I just want to remind you that the visibility would be for vehicle traffic coming from the east headed westbound, which is across the road, across the median. It would take considerable of your time and attention if you're driving, even if you're probably going to make a right turn lane into one of the stores there, to go out of your way to notice that east elevation. But either way, if you do, I think you're going to see a nice looking backside of this Firestone project. And once again, this is a composite of these Firestone buildings, and this is what we call a modern metal panel design. The access and circulation issue, I think you guys did a very good job tonight of vetting out this issue and asking these questions. And so I'm just going to quickly go through it, but everything that staff said we fully support and endorse because we know it's grounded in evidence and the engineering mathematics behind it. So this is the direct access via the Florence Boulevard, and this is also the access. And as Mr. Itel mentioned earlier, you can also go around the other way through the gas station, and there's multitude of ways to enter from Pottybomb and from Florence Boulevard. So these are additional access. Another issue is the type of use for this property and what kind of impact it has. There was some discussion earlier tonight about, well, how many cars are going to come? And our statistics show that 184 cars approximately would come every single day to this Bridgestone, which is very low compared to the other potential uses that are allowed as of by right on this site. You don't even have to apply for a CUP. The only use that I think would probably have fewer traffic than a tire store is an office. The other uses that would have considerable more traffic if they were able to come here would be a health clinic, a bank, any type of restaurant, a medical office, and a small shop. And I think that's an important consideration in light of what Ms. Guthrie has to say and what the funeral home has in terms of concerns about vehicular impact. If it's not going to be a Bridgestone, the other use that will eventually be here will probably be one of those uses that have exponentially much larger traffic volume. So I think in terms of a cost-benefit analysis and in terms of an analysis of concerns about traffic, probably one of the better options they could hope for is a use such as Bridgestone. Overall city benefits, which is very important, is that this would create at least 10 new jobs. It's an estimated $35,000 in yearly new city tax revenue. As I said earlier tonight, 12% of the building lot use would be in use. 41% of this property would be open space. And obviously, Bridgestone Firestone is a nationally known name. They have nationwide customer service warranty, and it's a great infill development ready to build. And then the one more thing I just want to add in terms of that landscaping, we talked about the trees and the maturity of the trees. Excuse me. The minimum requirement for that site would be, I believe, 20 trees and 50 shrubs. We were going to be doing 30 trees and 100 shrubs. So I know there's a question tonight about the maturity of the trees. I really don't think that's a question that can really be answered tonight because obviously you're going to hear the maturity is going to be a while, but let's talk about the shrubs. 100 shrubs is going to be a significant improvement on that site than what you know is there today. So I appreciate your time. I asked if I can have some time for rebuttal for any of the other comments, and I look forward to any of the questions you might have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this time, does the commission have any questions for the applicant?
Well, yes, I do.
Member Benedict.
Any chance we can see the landscape plan? Oh, I'm sorry.
It's on a different slide.
So on the landscape plan, appreciate the making the, well, look at there, boom. Making the adjustments to add that to the east side. Northeast, the trees stop. Can you expound on why they wouldn't continue or couldn't continue?
I cannot expound on that. I'll allow Mr. Gagliardi, if he wants to.
Would part of that block the Warren's sign? Trying to remember where exactly the Warren sign is located, potentially. Right there at the entrance of that median.
Might be there.
No, because the building, I mean, if the tree's not any higher than the building.
If you look at the far right edge, at the top of the dotted line, on the median, the grayed out area,
Right there.
Yeah.
but just over to the right of that, in the median area. Is there a sign there in the middle of the median?
Can't see it with the building.
Trying to look to direction of staff. That aerial, I think, even had it. So that sits in the median.
So that's the sign, but that's taken from,
This is taken from the east,
yeah.
but from the same concept if you're coming from the west, potentially.
So, you know, that was actually also some discussion that was some feedback that I provided when I got a submittal of the penultimate elevations where they were showing the trees at maturity. I did point out, you know, I think it does help to show and highlight and emphasize the fact that there are going to be trees between the building and the property line. However, there is a missed opportunity by not providing one more tree a little bit further to the north. And, you know, we also have the applicant who can speak to whether or not they'd have any issue or what the situation is regarding why there can't be one tree in the far northeast. But it's our position that that tree along the front, just immediately in front of the building, like directly north of the F and Firestone, you know, that tree could be pushed over to the side of the building.
With
So-
that, since this is a final landscape plan though, does that cause us any issues, or can we do that administratively?
Yeah, the commission can, if you were so inclined, just make a condition to either add additional tree to that corner of the building or relocate one of the existing trees. The tree count stays, you know, meets the requirement. So that's certainly something that's in your purview that you can condition.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I think that would help me, you know, envision the issues.
Sure.
For the beautification things, and you're gonna hear me talk about more trees in the next one too, but, I'm just kinda surprised that that tree wasn't there.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, what am I missing?
Yeah.
that-
And
that
Commissioner
you-
Miller, you may be right about the sign for the Warren Funeral Home. I'm not exactly sure where that sits
If you
in
go to
relation.
the satellite view of all lots we're talking about, a clean one though, without overlays. So you can see the shadow of the sign at the very peak of the median for just below the arrow for Warren. And so even though there's trees on the front side and there's a building, you throw a tree right up there at the corner, you could potentially be hindering their existing sign further. And so, part of me, I don't necessarily think that it's a condition other than however we need to legally get around it and then work it out. Because if the Warren said, no, we don't want a tree there, then we shouldn't put one there. But we forced them to, then because of a condition, then that's just silly. But because it's a final and not a preliminary, that makes it a little bit more difficult, I think.
As Mr. Tice indicated, though, if everyone's agreeable to that condition, it would just be a matter of
Well,
adding that condition, and then they would have to just do a
Yeah.
revision on their
We
landscape.
may get the opportunity, well, I guess technically during public input, it's comments, we can't, but maybe we'll get an answer to that, potentially, we'll find out.
If I may answer that question, I just want to let you know that we don't have an issue if you want to move a tree or add a tree, provided that you have the opportunity to make sure that it's where you want it to be.
I don't
In
know
case-
if
in
you
case
gotta
you
add
don't
another
want-
one, you guys got a lot of trees going on there, that's a lot of tree trimming.
I think we have enough, but
No, add another one, come on.
Add another one. Any other questions for the applicant? Member Dugan?
You built a lot of these Firestone buildings. This is the latest style. On the east side, it's all metal. Have you ever built one with a decorative block wall where it's all the way on the east side here instead of tin?
I'm sorry, repeat
Have
that
you
question.
built any like that?
I have not been part of any cases that have been part of a tire store with a block wall. If you're asking about slump block, no, I have not been part of any cases with that. I do think that this design is more aesthetically pleasing, but I think beauty's in the eye of the beholder. So that's a question up to person who's looking at it. But to me, in my preference, I think modern technology for that type of elevation might be more aesthetically pleasing for that site than slump block.
And you showed us the three designs for the first one, second one, and third one. And did the mortuary approve the last design? They were happy with that?
I did not say that the mortuary approved or is happy with anything, and if I gave that impression, I apologize. What I tried to say was that we have tried to listen to them and have repeatedly gone back to them to try to get their support and to try to show them that we understand their concerns. I think what you can take from tonight is that we made a good faith effort to drastically improve that elevation, and we made a good faith effort to incorporate the concerns that were addressed to us. I would love for them to give us their support, but obviously that's up for them to grant that to us. But ultimately, the vote is up to you to make that decision whether or not we did a good enough job of addressing the concerns of another property owner.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any other questions for the applicant? Snyder, you didn't raise your hand? Is he sleeping?
Thank you all.
No
Thank
further
you.
questions.
Okay, thank you. Right. All right, so at this time, then we will open it up to the public. And so if anybody from the public would like to comment to this agenda item, please come forward and state your name and address for the record.
I'm working it. I'll give it a second glance for you.
Some elbow grease in there. Come on, really scrub it down.
It should be good.
You're good. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight to address you. And I do want to say thank you to staff for all the effort they put into it, and for Mr. Galvin and Brad for listening to our concerns. And we'd hoped we'd gotten a little further along with the architecture issue than we did. But I'm going to start with a couple items on traffic. It was mentioned, and there was a graphic shown, that there is a access easement through the Circle K that allows people to drive back and forth and go to the Firestone. Working with Mr. Basha, the traffic engineer at Rose Law Group, we both researched the available easements, and there is no access easement through the Circle K. Doesn't mean somebody can't drive through the Circle K to take a shortcut, but the only access easement, there are two. The one access easement allows that jug handle access at Florence Boulevard. That's a joint access easement. The second, the amendment to that allows the joint access easement on the north-south road. So I just point out that there is no access easement through Circle K. It keeps getting brought up, but unless somebody can produce one, we have not been able to locate one. And I checked the recorded documents through the Pinal County Recorder's Office. Traffic counts for Circle K. Circle K development, this comes from the August 2015 traffic study. Circle K development is anticipated to generate 2,140 daily trips, with 166 trips occurring during the AM peak hour and 195 trips occurring during the PM peak hour. It was something that I had requested from Mr. Gagliari a few weeks ago, looking at the numbers for both the Circle K and Firestone. So to answer your question.
Thank you.
We are in support of staff's recommendation to connect the existing access drive through the preschool site, the north of the site, which does exist, to the north-south road. And we appreciate that happens. That will pull, I think, some cars down to Potty Bomb that want to make a left onto Florence Boulevard, because they obviously can't do that at the right turn only at the north. So we don't think it solves the problem. We don't know that there is a solution to the problem. Speaking with both Mr. Eitel and Mr. Basha, the problem was created when that drive went in pre-Circle K, being too close to the access drive to Warren's Funeral Services. I had hoped that the traffic engineers would come up with a solution, but there doesn't seem to be one in sight. So those are my comments on the traffic issues. In regards to the building itself, I do appreciate that they made some attempts to dress up that east elevation. I think there is a PAD, it's called the Plum Plaza PAD. It covers the property to the east, and it includes the Warren Funeral Service property. There is no PAD on the Firestone site. Their PAD does have architectural requirements, which I did share with the applicant, and said, even though you're not tied to this PAD, as a good neighbor, if maybe you could come in closer, and of course, it didn't allow a metal building. If the metal building is the greatest and latest architecture that they do, then I think our concern is that very flat, lengthy wall that faces to the east. There is nothing that steps in and out. There are no, there's nothing that comes out and creates any kind of shadow movements. I think on the other side of the building, they have the little red awnings. I mean, if there were awnings on that side, so you had some shadow, you had some in and out movement, I think a lot of the problem with that wall is that it is a flat wall. Even if it's painted a couple of different colors, it's flat. The applicant's attorneys did ask me, what do you think we should do? How do we solve this problem? I don't want to give them the answer, because you know what that does. As soon as you say this is the solution and somebody else doesn't like it. So, I mean, we gave them advice to, come up with something more creative, talk to your architects, and what we got is different paint colors. So, no, the Warrens are not satisfied with this solution. But I don't see us getting much closer unless staff can work with them and perhaps get some additional elements on that side that give it more three-dimensional look to it.
Thank you.
I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
During public input, we're not allowed to have questions.
So you're not happy with the east wall?
We're not
Okay.
happy with the east wall.
Member Dugan.
No questions.
And, I will make one other point, and to staff says this is not a PAD, so they can't really dictate the architecture. But remember, this is not, this is a conditional use permit. This commission does have the right to add conditions, because a conditional use permit says that the proposed use will have no adverse effect on the adjacent uses. And you can add conditions. So you can condition the architecture, even though staff doesn't feel comfortable doing it because they don't have the benefit of a PAD.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Oh, you're not asking questions
Yeah, we can't
at
ask
this point.
questions during
Okay,
the
got it.
public portion. Get a wipe down and. Oh, no.
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, I am Paul Allerton. I reside here outside of Casa, Grande on North Cox Road, outside of the city limits. Some of you on this commission know me by another name. It's called Paco. Took Dennis a while because of the mask to finally figure out who I really was. Mr. Benedict actually recognized me after a while, and I can answer a bunch of your questions for you
Okay.
that you asked.
Can I get your full address before you continue?
11734 North Cox Road,
Thank you.
okay?
Perfect.
I was trying to not give you the whole address so I wouldn't have somebody following me home later. And the reason I'm up here is I own the property to the east side. And you brought up some valid questions about the owner of that property, and I really don't know what my plans are. I've owned it for about 14 or 15 years now. But you're correct. In my mind, it's a metal building. It's this is probably a word that I don't know if you hear it a lot in here, but the east elevation doesn't have a lot of sex appeal. And Jackie Guthrie is correct. I mean, it needs some help as far as we're concerned. I'm concerned about the metal part of it, the metal building. It doesn't really fit the decor up and down Florence Boulevard. If you look at some of the other buildings, the only other thing that you do have is one that was built back in the 70s. I wasn't here, I was going to school, and that's the Harbor Freight Building, which was the old co-op building. When they located, and of course, and I was reminding my wife tonight, who wasn't here at the time, that Pert and Florence Boulevard was pretty much out in the sticks in Casa Grande in those days when that was built, if you can believe that. That's how long I've been here. So I just wanted to get up here and express my concerns about that. I do have concerns about the traffic also, because I think mostly primarily because of the median out there. All your westbound traffic that's going to want to enter to the Firestone store is going to be dumped onto Potty Bomb. People are not, they're going to go into the Circle K lot, they're going to go back through the preschool. That median has been kind of a thorn in our side for quite a few years since ADOT put that in. It's really restricted our access to this property. But with that said, I appreciate your time and all of your comments that you've all made tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Anybody else from the public like to come and speak on this agenda item? I will open it up. Is anybody from the electronic world via Zoom or whatever, I think that's what we're using, want to speak on this agenda item?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
Yes.
John McGuire, 1748 North St. Francis Place. I'll be pretty brief tonight. You covered pretty much everything. I too appreciate all the parties involved coming together during this past 30-day postponement and making significant progress. I don't know that we could, that the applicants could have done too much more than they've done while still putting up the kind of building they desire to put up. I will say a couple things about the driveway out to this preschool on Potabom. I think it's reasonable to only really expect that traffic going outbound will actually use that, because what people are going to do when they turn left from Florence westbound to southbound Potabom to go into the Firestone, they're going to turn into the Circle K, not even realizing there's a driveway, 150 feet down further, until they've been in and out of it a few times. That could change over time, but initially I think everybody's just going to go right into the Circle K and go across. But it could alleviate some of the outbound traffic, and it does mitigate some of the emergency vehicle issues that were mentioned. So I don't have a big issue with having that there. If any little piece could help resolve the traffic conflicts at the driveway onto Florence. As far as the wall, I think they've done an amazing job mitigating what they can, given the kind of building they are. I think that we didn't get an official answer to the trees question yet, about how big they are to start with and how big they'll be, how quickly. That would be nice to know, just so we can see what's going to be like initially. But I too agree that eventually there's going to be something else on the previous speaker's property, and that's going to mitigate that view issue a lot. So somebody in the chat room, by the way, pointed out that the J. Warren sign is 70 feet from Florence Boulevard. So I'm not sure that can be, because I think the building for community center standards is up 25, 30 feet from the curb line, correct? If so, that means the sign really can't be viewed from the eastbound lanes no matter what goes in here. So, and I also just want to throw my always public access comments that I get, or public input that I get from my social media world. And while there's some concerns that you've voiced, most of the comments, even before tonight's additional improvements, said they were supportive of the project. So I appreciate your work to everybody involved, and I hope that they get approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from And we'll close the public portion then. Real quick, I have a couple questions from staff. The applicant, would you like to come forward and address a couple of the things? I think I can do that.
Yes, I wasn't sure if I could come up for rebuttal to a couple of the points that were made earlier tonight, and I don't know if someone has my presentation, but if they can show what the building looks like from the north and from the west, I greatly appreciate it. I just want to respond to a couple of comments by Ms. Guthrie. In fact, an easement was recorded for the very issue she was talking about back in May, and it was a requirement from the city for the preliminary plat and for the final plat. So there is an easement there. The question about the east elevation, you know, we tried to talk and negotiate and listen to Ms. Guthrie. When she said to you tonight that she wasn't going to give us some of the ideas that she was thinking of, I wish I had that power, but I'm not a mind reader. So I could only incorporate the best of what I heard from the criticisms that she had. I think that everything we did for that east elevation really did go to the questions that she had about the east elevation. There was an issue earlier tonight, Commissioner Benedict, you asked about the tree. I found out the answer to that question, if you don't mind. It is the existing water service enters the building in that northeast corner. The reason that there's no tree there is not to conflict with the water line. So that was a water line issue. And the other point I want to make tonight is on the traffic question. Mr. Itel talked to you about the traffic issues and how much traffic would be there with their use. We have that in our presentation from Mr. Paul Basha, a renowned traffic engineer. I did not hear any statistics tonight from Ms. Guthrie, and I did not hear any evidence presented tonight from Ms. Guthrie. If she has some concerns about traffic, then obviously I appreciate and I respect that, but I didn't see anything from her that would be evidentiary to show that we have an adverse impact. Same thing for the east elevation. She may not like the east elevation, but it seems that it's more of an aesthetic concern that she has than a materially substantive evidentiary evidence that she has that would be an adverse impact. Once again, the median on Florence Boulevard, there's nothing we can do about that. There's nothing I can do about that. So any westbound traffic has to deal and negotiate with that median. They're going to come down. But when you think about the access through the preschool, through the Circle K, and the right in, right out onto Florence Boulevard, I think that's really an exciting development because you have 3 different ingress and egress points.
Her battery must have died. Is this other one work? Use your wipes. Sorry.
Oh shoot, now we gotta.
Did you wipe it down?
Oh, now you gotta wipe
Baby
the whole
steps.
thing. Wipe the whole thing down.
Yeah, alright. Oh. Pop this one out. There we go.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we got through one agenda item. We're running through a battery. Oh. Sorry, everybody, for some of the noise.
Thank you. Murphy's Law, right, with microphones.
Right.
It's something we would not have thought about a year ago. But I just want to reiterate my final point, and then I was hoping that we can pull up the photograph of the building from our presentation.
Joe.
Joe, worry about the slideshow, not the microphone.
Slideshow?
Bring up the photo.
The photograph of the building. There you go. So once again, I just want to kind of go backwards a little bit. We have access points on Florence Boulevard through the Circle K from Potty Bomb for a property that is not sidelined by either Potty Bomb on the west. I think that's a really good opportunity, especially considering that this is a use that has very low volume traffic. If there's going to be another use there, I would hate to think about the vehicular impact that would have if this is not going to be the one. And as you can see, there was a discussion tonight about what would be pleasing to the eye from Florence Boulevard. I would venture to say this actually looks pretty good. So I appreciate your time. I think we did address everything with the elevations as much as we could in good faith, and I think we presented to you how, from a traffic standpoint, we're not going to be a negative impact, and I don't think you heard tonight how we would be. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Dugan.
I've got a question. Okay.
Why not?
Yeah, maybe I missed it, But did you guys or the staff get permission to have, it's okay for them to drive through the parking lot into the fire station?
Who? Wait, what?
I'm sorry?
The Circle K. Do you get permission from Circle K to drive through the parking lot?
That's what he started with.
Yeah.
You got, they
Yeah,
recorded an
they have,
easement and
yep. That jughead driveway,
Yeah.
Circle K can use, and that's the other thing, is that the jughead driveway is a very unique aspect of this property. It's also something that we did not create. So yes, Circle K can use that as well as we can too. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you all.
Yep. All right. Mr. Cagliardi, do you know the tree that is called out on that? Is it a Palo Verde?
So looking at
It's right there.
Jackie's notes, she indicates a desert willow, 30 feet tall would be its maximum height.
7 years.
Okay, oh, and it's just 5 to 7 years to maturity. It's a quick growing tree.
Okay, these are the other two.
Then the other two are Australian willows, 15 to 25 feet is their maximum height. It takes up to 10 years for maturity.
You just did what I was going to do when asking a question. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, remember?
can I throw out a question?
Yeah. why not?
Maybe the planner is the one to address this, I'm not sure. Occurs to me that, one of our problems is, okay, we're gonna we'll have two entrances off of Potty Bomb, entrances and exits. That's correct, right?
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And then, did anybody look at putting signage down on the one by the school to try to direct people back that way? To pass the Circle K and come.
Commissioner Benedict, no, not yet at this time. It's possible that there would have to be signage provided to help people wayfind. That hasn't been contemplated yet, but that would be a possibility.
And then the only other thing that I think I'll interject is everybody kept talking about metal buildings, and it's a metal panel is it would be like a stucco, right? It's the decor
Like a siding?
Yeah,
Yeah.
the decor of the building. The internal structure may also be metal, but it's not a corrugated metal building such as the old co-op, I think Harbor Freight. Sorry. I didn't think about it. I just knew it as co-op.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'd like just to clarify, I have no problem with the melded building. I think that the building looks very nice the way it's designed. I have a problem with that solid building. I would consider that an attractive nuisance. You've got apartment complex, you've got schools, you've got a bunch of movement in that area, and that's just inviting vandalism. When you have a big vacant area, there's no windows, you've got one door that's not gonna be accessed very often. I would consider that an attractive nuisance where you're attracting vandalism, especially in an area that's gonna have that kind of traffic and that kind of visibility. So it's a canvas for some people.
Thank you.
And just to not rebuttal, just the opposite side of the lot over at the other one, isn't that quite a large block wall, that they could do the same thing with, over where upper store is, just to the east of it? I mean, it's a big, the other side of the Starbucks.
Merle's Auto.
Merle's, yeah, Merle's. That's a big wall too.
Not nearly as big as this. I mean, the back side of it that this really is on the back side. And they have had some graffiti and stuff on the back side. It's just not as noticeable as it would be here. And I mean, it's not necessarily your responsibility to keep people from vandalizing your stuff, but that's what I would say is it's an attractive nuisance. It's kind of pulling that direction. If you want to spray paint your name on something, you want it to be seen, and would be seen.
Fred, couldn't we make them, the whole back end, have them light that whole area up so you wouldn't have that problem? Have lights on that building and light that whole baby up at night?
It has.
I'm open, I mean,
I think it has some.
yeah, I'm sure it has some lighting, but it just.
Yeah, I think you're gonna have that problem regardless of what building it is, and you're right, that it is very attractive, but by lighting it up, you're gonna minimize it.
Well, my other response to that is, I think if they start getting graffiti on there, they're going to take care of that. At that point, they'll address it. They're not wanting that on their building
Yeah.
either. They're gonna need to slow that part down. At least I would if I owned the property. I'd want to stop the graffiti.
Sure.
It's not my
You've been
property, not my
You've been a
concern.
police officer, how well did that work? Because I've been working in graffiti abatement, and when they find
Yeah.
a spot that they like, you can paint it over every other day.
Yeah, well, I know this isn't the right discussion of it, but there's ways to get around something like that, is with multiple lighting, with putting up some type of barrier to get around it. But you see people climb up on top of the street or the overpasses. So there's no way you can stop it all, but they will do, I'm sure, what's best. I know I would if I owned it.
All right, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make one. How's that?
I like that.
Mr. Commissioner, I would like to make a motion to approve the conditional use permit and associated conditions, the use resolution DSA 19-00151 for tire sales service and repair within a B2 zone with a listed specified conditions.
A second.
That was a mouthful.
Yeah.
That was the easy
That
part.
was the second.
A motion and a second. Any other discussion? Hearing none. Linda, would you please call the roll?
Member Benedict?
Yes.
Member Estrada?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Wake up.
No,
No? Okay.
that's correct, no.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
No.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Yes.
Chairman Miller?
Yes. Motion approved. Now, this is a three-part, right? Three-part series, so
Okay, I'll go for the second one too then. How about, I would like to make a motion to approve major site plan DSA 19-00152 for the Firestone with the listed conditions.
I have a question for the staff. Oh, ask me a
I
second.
have a motion on the floor.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion?
For the staff is, if we wanted to put lighting on the back of the building, would we have to, you put it in the major site plan, or would you put it in the landscaping plan?
You'd put it in the major site plan. You would add a condition right here.
Okay. And unless it's in there, it wouldn't be added.
Correct. If you add a condition that the east elevation have appropriate exterior building lighting, if it's already in the design, obviously, we're not gonna add it, but if it's not in the design, we would make them add it.
So do you think that plan on the east side, there's hardly any light on that thing at all?
I think, I don't know if there's lighting in the design today. I think appropriate lighting could help deter possible for graffiti. So I understand the concern, and I understand why you might add that condition.
Would it further accent some of the other concerns of a major plain wall all the way down that you guys are lighting up?
Maybe yes, maybe no. I really can't answer that. No.
That's fair.
It'll make the building more visible, that's for sure. It will.
Because you can put motion
And
sensor
it'll call attention to it.
You can put motion sensor lights, so if there's any kids or anything, get behind it, put graffiti on it, the lights would automatically come on, the motion, correct?
Sure, you could add a condition for motion sensing lighting on that elevation. You could do that.
So I'd like to amend that main motion to add motion sensor lights to the east side of the building.
So I have a motion to amend the existing motion, adding motion sensor lights to the east side of the building. Hearing no second, motion fails. Original motion still on the table. Linda, will you please call the roll?
Hey, Mr. Chairman Miller. Can you hear me? This is Mark.
Yes.
Was there a second to the original motion?
Yes, we had a motion and a second, and then we went into discussion, and that's when this came up for an amended.
Okay, I just want to make sure there was a second to the original motion.
Yep.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. So, Linda, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Member Benedict?
Yes.
Member Estrada?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
No.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
No.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Yes.
Chairman Miller?
Yes. Motion approved. And on to the final one,
I'll go for the
which is the landscape.
trifecta. I'd like to make a motion to approve the final landscape plan, DSA 19-0150.
Second.
Motion and second, that was Tucker. Second by Tucker.
Yes.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Linda, will you please call the roll?
Member Benedict?
Yeah, I wanted to comment, all of the votes on these, I just wanted to give a little bit of my reasoning. It looks to me like Firestone has followed our rules and worked to make accommodations for folks' concerns, communities' concerns, and so I think it's, that's the kind of thing we need to support, is those kinds of actions. Didn't get everything we want, but most of us don't. And with that, yes.
Member Estrada?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Yes.
Yes. Finally, we all agreed on something.
Trees.
Kind of.
Trees. We like all the trees. Congratulations. Thank you guys for all the hard work you put in, working with staff. Thank you everybody for being here on that agenda item. Oh, man. What was that, an hour and 40 minutes is one item?
No. How would you like to take a break for just a couple minutes?
Stump you.
All right. At the request of a commission member, we're going to take a 5-minute recess, roughly. Could you mute us all? agenda item, starting section F, new business. First item in there, City of Casa Grande is requesting public input in consideration for public hearing, briefing, and discussion on the city's proposed access management standards. So we're gonna have I believe, just a presentation on access standards within our community. Thank you. So with that, is Dwayne in charge of this? So Dwayne, you're gonna take it away. It's all yours, bud.
Okay, thank you. You know, a little over a year ago, we brought these new standards to you, and we also went to a study session with the city council. And there were some comments made that we thought we had to take care of, so we went back, took those comments into account, and we're back again tonight. As I'm sure you all know, our current access standards are almost 20 years old. There's a lot of things in them that need to be updated. We've all learned a lot more about access management over the years. And so Amy's going to talk about that. And Amy's probably the premier transportation planner in the state. So she really knows what she's doing. And I'm glad she's here tonight to help us out on this. That's all I have.
Well, thank you, Dwayne. I don't know I've gotten those accolades before. Well, as Dwayne mentioned, we were with you once before. I know we've got some new members, and it's been quite a while. So kind of just a quick refresher on access management, principles, benefits, and purposes. Obviously, a city's transportation system is made up of a variety of types of roadways, ranging from local roadways that are providing access to individual homes, for example, all the way up to freeways. And the goal is really to look at the level of access that is going to be provided to those various types of roadway facilities that can best present a balance between providing access to properties, but recognizing the role that those various types of roadways play in carrying through traffic. One of the other important aspects of access management is actually the safety benefits. As you reduce the number of access points on a roadway, the number of driveways on a roadway, the number of interactions between vehicles that are turning in and out of those driveways, you reduce the number of conflict points and therefore reduce the propensity for crashes to occur. Not only is obviously that a great safety benefit to the members of your community, but it also does, in fact, help improve the flow of traffic because you don't have as many incidents that are causing lane closures or lane obstructions when those crashes occur. There are a lot of ways to manage access. Some of the typical ones are through provision of a raised median. In other words, controlling those points where vehicles can make left and right turns from particular driveway locations. One of the important ones, I think, which we heard quite a bit about just a little bit ago, is the importance of joint driveways and cross access. So trying to minimize the number of driveways by maximizing the number of users for a particular driveway. Some of the other things that need to be considered are corner clearances. How close would you want those driveways to be with regard to an adjacent intersection, for example, and how close do you want those driveways to be spaced side by side? So really the purpose of the Access Management Manual is to help define the requirements moving forward. For example, when you have an applicant that comes in, is looking to develop a property, trying to define the criteria that should be used to help determine the location of those access driveways so that we can continue to promote a safe and efficient flow of traffic on the roadways to which they are accessing. And so, as I mentioned, when we look at factors to consider, there's really three main ones that are of primary focus when you develop access management strategies. One is the facility type again. So there's different types of facilities that we'll talk about in a minute, but arterial facilities, collector facilities, local facilities, they all have a different role in providing access to properties. A second important consideration factor is the spacing between driveways. As we see along Florence Boulevard, historically those have been developed with a lot of driveways in short succession. And looking forward to the future of planning for new development in Casa Grande, what can be done to try to optimize that spacing between driveways so we minimize conflict points and friction that's caused by movements in and out of driveways. And then the third, of course, is distance from intersection corners. Again, that is important because when you think about driveways that are spaced very closely to intersections, you create conflicts with vehicles that are entering and exiting those driveways and vehicles that are trying to pass through the adjacent intersection. So in a nutshell, the new guidelines for minimum driveway spacing that are going to be considered in the context of the new access management guidelines are about 660 feet for a principal arterial. So a principal arterial would be something like Florence Boulevard or Pinal Avenue that are really intended to carry a large flow of traffic through the city. For full access spacing, in other words, that would be driveways where all turns would be permitted, left turns in, left turns out. The recommendation would be a quarter-mile spacing. Similarly, a minor arterial, we would look to try to maintain that quarter-mile spacing for full access and offering a bit more leniency on the spacing for right-in, right-out driveways. In other words, the driveways where you're only allowed to enter via a right turn and exit via a right turn. When you get to a collector facility, those are typically more of your half or quarter-mile roadways. Again, providing greater level of access, 150-foot spacing. And then on local roadways, those would that would, for example, traverse through residential areas, that full access spacing of 30 feet. So in other words, you'd have a driveway that would be at least 30 feet away from your neighbor's driveway. The big change here now is when you look at those new guidelines, which are presented in the column to the right, in contrast to what the old guidelines were, you'll see that those distances have increased considerably. On a principal arterial, it used to be in that 200 to 275 foot range. So we're nearly tripling that for right-in, right-out access, and about 6 times that for the full access spacing. Similarly, for the minor arterials, they used to range in the 150 to 230 foot range for full access. Now we're again looking at that 450 feet, so double to triple that just for right in, right out, and considerably more for a full access location. When we get to collector and local roadways, the previous access management guidelines actually had no specifics defined for those, and so we're trying to define some here with that 150-foot minimum, 300-foot preferred for collectors, and that 30-foot minimum for local. As I mentioned, one of the other items of consideration is minimum corner clearances, and this one can get a little tricky. If you look at the diagram that's in the upper left corner of this particular slide, you'll see a sort of a representative intersection. You might think of that as a signalized intersection there in the middle of that diagram. And then we look at desirable distances as you're traveling towards the intersection from the west, that location B, that we call the driveway upstream of the intersection, where you may not have a raised median. We're looking again at, trying to maintain a 440-foot spacing, and in the reverse direction, coming out of the intersection towards driveway A, that's 660 feet for an arterial. Again, when we get to collector and local, those restrictions and those spacings are further reduced recognizing that those types of facilities are intended to provide a greater level of access to the abutting properties. So what does this all mean? Well, we thought we would give you a few examples. So this is some vacant area on the southeast corner of the intersection of Courtson Road and Truckle Road. And a couple of things that we notice here is the way that that particular area is divided. There's 3 separate parcels, one immediately on the corner and a second one then further to the south. Those are outlined in red. Based on these access management standards, it would not be desirable to provide full access to those locations. In fact, the recommendation would be that we would look for opportunities to gain cross-access easements with that adjoining larger parcel. And we've noted here one condition where you would provide 2 full access locations to that larger parcel. And that would be based on the corner clearances and spacings from adjacent driveways. A second option that would be available at this particular location would be to provide 1 full access location onto Courtson and 2 right-in, right-out driveways onto Truckle Road. So I think the important point here is that while we do have the standards that we're carrying forward, there is some flexibility as someone's looking to develop. They have options for the type and level of access that they would like to provide. We have a second location. This is along McCartney Road between Tucker and Palomino. And a couple of interesting things going on here. There's already the option for full access to Tucker as a shared access, and you'll see that indicated in the arrow on the right of the slide. And then because of the current full access that's provided on McCartney at Circle K, we need to maintain some adequate spacing, which would allow for a right-in, right-out driveway on McCartney between Tucker and Palomino, providing adequate spacing between the Circle K driveway and Palomino Parkway intersection. Another interesting thing to note here is that that particular parcel you'll see in the kind of box that's located all the way to the left of here, it would not qualify for access to Palomino because it would not meet the minimum spacing requirements from the Palomino-McCartney Road intersection. That is because that particular roadway is classified as an arterial. Palomino Parkway is classified as an arterial. If the roadway were to be reclassified as a collector, then a driveway could be permitted at 175 feet from the intersection. So there would be an option then to allow for that. And that would be something that the city would need to consider in terms of the role that Palomino Parkway is providing for circulation through the city. We have a third example. This is Florence Boulevard between Pennis and Cherith. It's a 56-acre parcel. In this particular instance, because it is so large, there's opportunities for full access along Hennis, as well as 2 full access driveways onto Florence Boulevard. And even with those 3 full access points, there's opportunities for additional right-in, right-out driveways along both Hennis Road and Florence Boulevard. Another option for this particular site would be to provide a full access along Florence Boulevard and a full access along Hennis Road with 2 right-in, right-out accesses to Florence Boulevard and 1 additional right-in, right-out access to Hennis Road. So I think the message is here, we're trying to recognize that there is a role that these roadways play in facilitating the safe and efficient flow of traffic through your community while providing access to the abutting property. The guidelines, though they have become more stringent than what existed in the past, still provide ample opportunity for varying scenarios of access to particular parcels. We recognize that there are going to be circumstances where we're not going to be able to achieve the desired specifications that are incorporated in these new guidelines. And to that end, we allow an option through the traffic impact analysis process for an applicant to prepare a traffic impact analysis, and through that traffic impact analysis, demonstrate that there may be an alternative to access that may not meet these particular requirements, but could still safely and efficiently accommodate the traffic generated by that particular development. One of the other things I want to mention is, in conjunction with this access management guideline update, we did make some revisions to the traffic impact analysis procedures. One of the key things that we've done to try to help ease the traffic impact analysis process for applicants and for city staff as they go to review these is we've developed what we call a checklist that we're requesting that applicants would prepare and submit to the city for review at very early stages of discussions of site plan approval. That particular checklist would document the characteristics of the proposed development. Where is it located? Is it going to be developed in multiple phases? What are the land uses that are going to be proposed? And sort of those peak hours of operation. We typically think of the morning and the evening peak hours, but we also understand that there are different uses that could have a varying peak. For example, a school that may have more of a midday peak. And so you want to make sure that you're considering that as well, and the implications that may have during that time of day. One of the other things that we're asking about very early in the process is queuing. That would be particularly applicable to things such as drive-through fast food restaurants, coffee shops that have drive-throughs. Any of those particular types of uses where they're going to be generating a significant amount of traffic that their patrons won't be getting out of their vehicles, but instead will be forming in a line waiting for service. And we want to make sure that that site is able to accommodate that anticipated queuing on site, so those queues are not spilling back and inhibiting the flow of traffic on the adjacent roadway system. One of the other items that needs to be noted in the checklist is what is that anticipated development trip generation associated with the phasing of development. So we know that very early on. That helps define what that extent of the study area needs to be and what the horizons of the study need to be. Are we just going to look at a very near term impact of this, or is it a much larger development that could have longer term implications on our roadway system? And then we also need to get some consensus on what their data sources and key assumptions are going to be. Do we need to know that you're going in on this particular site, but by the way, we just approved something down the road that is going to be adding traffic that's not there right now, but it will be there before you get in. And we need to make sure that when they do their traffic analysis, they're accounting collectively for not only what's there today, but what's going to be occurring before they may even open. And the intent of all this then is to make sure that as the traffic impact analysis is prepared, everybody, the applicant and city staff, is on the same page about what those key assumptions are going to be, what the requirements for the content of the traffic impact analysis are going to be, so that it essentially helps minimize the surprises that may occur when that traffic impact analysis is submitted for review by the city. The goal here is to really make it easier on everybody. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions. I think just one other thing that I want to mention in terms of next steps for this, we do plan again to go back to City Council for another work session before we would come back to both Planning and Zoning and City Council to request approval of these guidelines. I think it's also important to note that the information contained in these guidelines ultimately will result in some revisions to the city code that I know Paul and his staff have been working on and working towards and understanding what those implications will be. So there's a bit of a next step in this process once we get past the establishment and finalizing these particular guidelines.
Thank you.
So now I'm open for questions.
Thank you. Yes. Is that Member Schneider? Member Schneider, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry. May I proceed?
Yes, you may.
Thank you. Ms. Moran, first of all, thank you for a very clear presentation. I particularly appreciate the various examples. I will go to examples 10 and 11. Example 10 is a little sensitive to me because I recognize not only that site, but the fact that there was a project in the southeast corner that came before the commission some time ago, and the full access off of Courtson down to that corner was proposed, and there was some concern on the part of at least one commissioner that we were going to be putting a major roadway right on the back of a subdivision that hadn't had any traffic back there whatsoever. So that's a little bit of history, but I'm pleased that you then showed us example 11, which was, in my mind, certainly a more attractive option. So thank you for listening to me rant, but I wanted to provide you some positive impact. My question to you has to do with your future plans for discussions with the community, specifically the city council, etc. I'm wondering I would like to suggest, let me put it that way, that at some time before final adoption, that you all work with, for example, the Chamber of Commerce, because I can foresee a certain number of local businesses who are going to be looking at this, and landowners as well, who may have some serious questions, some objections, some observations, etc. And with all due respect to the City Council, I think that the Chamber could add some clarification and a certain body of, a certain body of support for the final product. Thank you.
Member Snyder, thank you. That's a great recommendation, and I will certainly confer with Paul and Dwayne as we move this process forward.
Any other questions? Member Dugan.
Yes. When you go to Chandler, maybe this has to do right in and right out. When you go to Chandler and Gilbert, all the major intersections have right turn lanes. Keeps the traffic flowing, especially the major intersections. There ain't one that's being built that they don't put a right turn lane in. In our city, almost every major intersection doesn't have a right turn lane. And the traffic would flow so much better if you put right turn lanes. Maybe I'm misunderstanding. Is that what you mean by right turn lanes and right out? Because the major intersections should be mandatory to have right in and right turn out third lanes, because some of the newer roads in Casa Grande have it. But let's say if Cottonwood and Treckle, they're going to put development on that corner, they should make it mandatory that they put a right turn lane. Everything makes it flow much so better, because that's what they're doing up in Mesa and Gilbert area. And most all the bigger cities are putting right turn lanes in. So a requirement should be right turn lanes at all major intersections to keep the traffic flow better. Because you can sit there and the traffic is backed up, and if you had a right turn lane, the traffic would, you get rid of a lot of traffic in a hurry. So is that required on this plan?
So that, Member Dugan, is a very astute observation. Typically, when we're talking about the turn lanes at the actual arterial or collector intersections, that is not something that is addressed in the concept of an access management manual per se. A couple of things related to that, though. Part of the rationale for providing those requirements for spacing from a driveway to an intersection is to allow ample space to provide or construct a right turn lane that would not have a driveway entering into the middle of it. So that's one point to be made. The other point then goes to the requirements for a traffic impact analysis. And typically when you're looking at a new development that's coming in and the requirements for them to conduct a traffic impact analysis, they will be required to look at what the existing condition is of the adjacent intersections. They'll be required to document the performance of those intersections, usually in terms of the delay that's experienced by motorists traveling through those intersections. And then they'll have to look at that particular intersection and acknowledge the potential impact of the new traffic that they will be adding at that location. And quite often to that end, it's through those traffic impact analyses that there is a conversation between an applicant and the city staff about what sort of improvements may be required, not just to their particular site driveway, but to adjacent intersections. And several times that would include such items as adding a turn lane or perhaps even extending the length of storage available in a turn lane for a left turn lane, as an example. So that as traffic queues up in those lanes, they're not backing up or spilling into the through traffic lanes. So in a way, because the access management manual does reference the requirements of the traffic impact analysis, it does address that to a certain extent. I know that, typically cities as a whole look to monitor how their traffic is flowing, and certainly if there are opportunities to work with developers as they're coming on site to improve the flow through those intersections. That's beneficial not only to the general public who's traveling through those, but also beneficial to the developers because it eases access to their particular site as well. So, Dwayne, I'm not sure if you have any more you want to add to that, but that was my 2 cents on that topic.
Well, every major intersection to have right turn lanes, the major arteries, because other cities do that. But the big thing that you got to think about is not the 60,000 people you got coming here. We're going to be 100,000 people probably within 10 years, if not sooner. So when you got 100,000, 40,000 more people driving on these roads, you got to look at that.
Member Dugan.
Yes.
So I think, I don't know, I agree with your point, but we're only talking about access in and out of lots, not the intersections themselves.
Intersections here too.
Only in regards to spacing to the intersections on the distance that those access, right, the access into the lot. So we're not actually talking about roadways and turn lanes and medians at this moment, only access in and out of properties.
So we're not allowed to talk about this.
Well, no, I think we are, and I think you're making a good point, but for the sake of time, I'm trying to stick us to the topic at hand, which would be the access in and out of lots, not necessarily roadways. If we want to have Dwayne present at another meeting in regards to traffic flows and potential opportunities in the city, we can do that.
I'd love to do it.
Okay. For now, we'll maintain conversation in regards to access. Any other questions for staff?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. These pictures you're showing us are very helpful. This may be a very scary way to do this presentation, but I'm wondering what these would look like on top of our current build-out, like on Treckle Road, Treckle Road down where it's, where it's developed out, so that we have that. I can't envision what 300 feet is, or 660 feet, or, putting it on top of some existing might be helpful as we, for a demonstration.
I agree.
Just as you
Yeah.
guys, staff is thinking
Here's
about
what
how
you
to do
have,
this.
and then here, let's overlay what this new one would look like. Obviously, it won't work, but this is what it would look like, and then we all know traffic flows. I think we drive within the community often.
Yeah, but I think it would put it all in perspective as to what it would actually look like.
Sure. Some good feedback there for staff. Anything else for staff? Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you guys for your presentation. Is there anything else you guys wanted to add? Dwayne?
I thought Amy did a really great job, and for Mr. Dugan's interest, I'm real interested in a lot more right turn lanes also. So that's something we're looking at in the future.
I thank you for that. So I'd like to have that on the plan.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Amy, and make sure that you transfer the host back over.
1 second. So, Mr. Chair, this is a public hearing.
Oh, I gotta open it
So
up
you
to the
might want to
public.
open it up to see if there's any comments from the audience or from our Zoom public as well.
Sure. So would anybody from the public like to come and speak to this agenda item? Seeing nobody to jump on. Seeing nobody, I'll open it up to the Zoom
Mr.
meeting.
Chairman?
Yeah?
Mr. Chairman, John McGuire, 1748 North St. Francis. Just very, very quickly, in a matter of time, I appreciate the presentation. She did an excellent job. I also would be interested in those other discussions that the commission just mentioned. I will tell you, just by chance, I've recently been discussing median and access issues along Florence Boulevard with the public as part of my beautification of the city efforts. And whoever said there will be pushback, Commissioner Snyder, I think, is absolutely right. There will be pushback when medians and those types of things get discussed. So anything we can do to get the proper public notification and input would probably be very useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will close the public portion. And since there's no action to be taken, thank you all for your information and input. Oh, I get to see some faces. Right? With that, we will move to the next agenda item, public hearing and consideration of request by the Dan Carlis, DSA 2000091, zone change from urban ranch to general industrial.
All right.
Mr. Horn.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. I'll try and keep this under an hour and a half.
Take your time. I want to make sure you're thorough.
So Dan Carlos is requesting approval for a zone change from urban ranch to general industrial for approximately 90 acres. It's generally located north of Maricopa. Yes.
We can't see the slide.
You're not sharing.
Sorry. Let me
Yeah. Don, I did make you the host.
She made John the host.
John, can you transfer that over?
So I don't run these meetings, although I'm in them about a million times.
I'm sorry.
We have a public
How do I give
member
it back to Joe?
in control of our meeting. All right.
Who am I making the host? The one that says Casa Grande Planning?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well,
Thank
my
you.
apologies.
No.
Actually, John now.
John needs to do it now.
John has to do it now. John, you click on the name, right, and select.
Well, I can't
Okay,
promise I'll keep
Joe,
it under an
somebody help me
hour.
out. I put share screen. I put share screen, or what am I?
No, you look at the participants, and then you'll see the participant as Casa Grande Planning. You right-click on that, and you'll go ahead, and it'll give you the option to make me the host.
Okay.
You know he's gonna want a pay increase.
There you go. You should have it now.
You are now the host.
All right, let's see now.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right. Let's see.
No. You had it. You had it. You just have to click share.
Well, now.
There you go.
All right, now does everybody see it?
Well done.
All right. So I'll still make it under that window. All right.
It'll be tight though, so speed it up, would you?
All right, so Dan Carlos is requesting approval for a zone change from urban ranch to general industrial for approximately 90 acres, generally located north of Maricopa Casa Grande Highway and east of Bianco. The site's located, outlined in red there. Little overview on it. The site, along with the surrounding property, were recently annexed into the city. The purpose of this particular request is to align the zoning with the existing general plan and position the property for future industrial development. The applicant did submit conceptual plans as an exhibit to this rezone, indicating a couple of potential uses. However, if the zone change is approved, all the uses permitted and/or conditional in the I-2 zone district would be available to be developed. So any future development will be required to obtain approval of a major site plan in the future. Shown here is the existing zoning, shown as urban ranch. You can see the location where they're proposing it to be I-2 or general industrial. Just an overview of the general plan map. You see the manufacturing and industry area shown. I do want to point out that this area has also been reclassified as manufacturing and industry in last year's general plan amendment. That's also the site of the potential Nacero project. And you can see the location of this zone change request. So when looking at the review criteria, the first is that the proposed use shall be in conformance with the general plan. The area for the proposed request lies within the Phase 1 or the primary growth area of the General Plan 2020. And the requested zoning of I-2 is appropriate in the manufacturing and industry land use category. There is a policy within our general plan to require mitigation measures or restrict development in areas subject to flooding. You can see in the diagram there that the site is partially impacted by the 100-year flood zone. The applicant did provide a drainage analysis as part of his submittal. Fortunately, the property can mitigate the flood issues by raising the base floor elevations of affected buildings or potential appropriate other appropriate site modifications as well. So the applicant will further evaluate this at the time of any major site plan submittal. The next review criteria is a rezoning conforms to the general plan if it proposes land uses, densities, or intensities within the range of identified uses of the general plan. The request for a zone change to I-2 within the manufacturing and industry land use category is an allowable and appropriate land use within the general plan. And the final one is that the proposed zone change is necessary and proper at this time to meet the land use needs of residents of the city. So this zone change will allow the owner to appropriately develop and utilize the property. It may also potentially lead to the extension of infrastructure that may in turn facilitate additional industrial development in that same area. Public notification went out. It met or exceeded all our requirements. We did not receive any comments in this particular case. So in conclusion, staff recommends the commission forward a recommendation of approval of the zone change request, DSA 20-00091 from urban ranch to general industrial. I be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for staff?
I just have one.
Member McBride?
What are all those houses?
Excuse me?
In one of the diagrams, there's a huge housing area.
Yeah, it's right there on the screen right now.
Are you talking down in this area? It's
Yes.
The Desert Carmel
Okay. Is that-
subdivision. It's currently in the county.
Okay, I didn't realize it went over that far.
Yeah, it's real close to that. So Nacera will actually be like butted up against part of that Desert Carmel.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Awesome, thank you. Do we have an applicant? All right, would the applicant and/or their representative like to come forward? Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Commissioner and members of the commission. Thank you so much, Landowner Horn, for your support. My name is Tiffany Thomas. I'm a representative of the landowner. I'm with Realty One Group, 3530 South Val Vista in Gilbert. Be happy to answer any questions about the project.
Thank you for being here and sticking it out this
Yeah,
long.
my pleasure.
All right, I just have to say that. Is there any questions for the applicant?
At this time, do you have any potential industry or that wants to go into this area to build at this time, or just for future management, future property development? Do you have anything?
Yeah, not at this time. The team is open to development of a variety of different uses like we've discussed. So we should be able to adapt to what the industry needs and support the needs of the city.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
And at this time, I will open it up to the public. Since I know there's no more public in here, is there anybody on Zoom from the public that would like to speak to this agenda item? I'm going to close the public portion and bring it back to the commission.
Mr. Chairman, I move to get a zone shift request DSA-20-00091 from an urban ranch to general industrial.
Second.
So I have a motion and second. So I have a motion and second for to forward a recommendation for approval for a zone change. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Linda, would you please call the roll?
Member Benedict?
Thank you for the interest in the city, and please proceed. Yes.
Member Estrada?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Yes.
Chairman Miller?
Yes. Congratulations. Good luck to you.
You gonna invite her to stay for the rest?
Yeah, I mean, don't feel like you need to skip out now that your agenda item's done. We're almost there.
I want to ride this one all out.
You can leave, though.
Oh, look at, she's like, oh, that's my car, I have to go.
It's calling me.
Dang it, that's my car, I gotta go, sorry. All right, next agenda item, DSA 20-00089, major site plan. Oh, look at, he took it off the screen from me, I was reading it off of there. Major site plan and landscape variance, no, that's a separate one. Yeah, no, landscape variance, all right. And DSA 20-00115.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. As you introduce this item, there are two specific applications associated with the project. The first is a major site plan for a proposed 3-story, 92-room Hampton Inn Hotel, proposed to be located at 2182 East Florence Boulevard. You notice it's just north of Florence, and just west of the Circle K at the northwest corner of Camino Mercado and Florence. It's on a recently platted 1.82 acre lot. They are proposing 107 on-site parking spaces. It's a 35-foot tall building, and there will also be an outdoor pool. I should mention that it has been recently platted. It was originally part of a larger lot owned by Circle K, but recently it went through a replat process, creating a 1.82 acre lot specifically for a separate site for development. I'm also going to do an overview of a second request pertaining to variances to the landscape code. The request is to reduce the number of trees required by code and also the number and placement of landscape islands. When reviewing major site plans, these are the following review criteria that have to be addressed. The staff report goes into it in a lot more detail, but I'm just going to talk about the items highlighted. The first criteria I've sort of married together. It's two separate criteria, but they essentially deal with the same concept: adequacy of the plan with respect to land use and the conformance with the general plan, because the general plan does identify land uses. This is in the general plan land use designation of community center. Staff has determined that this is the most appropriate land use designation for a building of this scale and use. It's a 3-story building on a 1.82 acre lot. It actually is quite dense. However, that's one of the intent of the community center land use form, is a real urban form that also, though, promotes walkability, and it de-emphasizes the appearance of vehicular activity. And that's done by screening parking areas as much as possible and promoting that pedestrian connection and connectivity. As a consequence of this being in the community center land use designation, staff is recommending a condition of approval regarding detached signage. It shall be limited to monument style and nature, no taller than 15 feet in height.
Great. If you're on Zoom, can you please mute yourself while we go through the presentation? Continue.
No problem. Some other ways that the intensity of the site is mitigated is the fact that along the north boundary, there is a 6-foot high screen wall proposed. Can you advance it? And there's also a low screen wall proposed along the front boundary. That softens the view of the parking area from the street. Another criteria I want to talk about is the impact of the plan on existing and anticipated traffic and parking conditions. So with the major site plan, there was a traffic impact statement provided and reviewed by the city traffic engineer, and it looked at the trip generation that was that the hotel would be generating and the impact it would have to the surrounding streets and drive access. The most westerly drive access on the site, that's highlighted in that orangish yellow color, was the area of concern, because for one, we wanted an additional ability to offer a right turn lane into the driveway, but that would be too close to the right turn lane and the driveway access for Clean Freak, located just immediately to the west, that you see on the screen. So what is being proposed is this westerly driveway is going to be shifted a little bit to the east, and that accommodates for a right turn lane to be provided, And so there'll be the ability to provide 2 right turn lanes from Florence into the site. One is being shared with Circle K. And then there's also 2 access points onto Camino Mercado with cross access through the site for vehicular travel, both behind Circle K and in front. The reason why that's important is that will take vehicles to Camino Mercado where there's a stoplight condition, so it'll be easier to potentially navigate turns. Regarding parking, they are providing the 107 parking spaces, which also happens to be the required parking. So it's a very tight site. That 107 parking spaces stems from the code where it's parked at 1.1 parking spaces per room, plus 1 space for the maximum number of employees on maximum shift. As far as building location and height is concerned, this site does have some challenges with regard to complying with setbacks. Because the city sign parcel sits directly in front of the site, it's a 50 by 50 foot area. It's zoned an urban ranch, as is the property to the north of them. And there is a code requirement that the setback from residential zoned properties is 45 feet. So they oriented the building in such a way that it does meet the 45, not only from the rear setback, but from that city sign parcel. However, from the rest of Florence, they are allowed to be as close as 35 feet. And then the side yard setbacks are also next to commercially zoned properties, so there's not a concern. And the side setbacks can be as close as 0 feet on one side and 15 on another. And as you can tell, they're of course meeting those. Here's a elevation view of all 4 sides of the building. It is 3 stories, as I mentioned, at 35 feet in height, which is the maximum allowed in the code. Staff had made originally 2 recommendations, but that has since been modified, or 2 conditions rather associated with the major site plan. They did, we do have a recorded final plat, so that has been stricken. That officially creates the lot for Hampton to develop. So that leaves 1 condition, which is regarding the detached signage. Moving on to landscape variances, the areas that the landscaping are being provided has been highlighted in the green. And as you can tell, it is a fairly tight site. They are providing 33 trees. Of those 33, 8 are existing, they're mature, and 22 or 24-inch box in size, and 3 or 15-gallon. 505 shrubs are being provided in accent plants, and then 25% of the landscape area is being provided, where 10% is the minimum. Where there's a code conflict is that 82 trees are actually required, and that stems from basically 2 requirements. 1 tree for every 30 feet of street frontage is required within the first 15 feet of the lot. So that would prompt the need for at least 10 trees in that area. And then there's another requirement that says 2 trees for every 3 parking spaces, which would yield 72 trees for a total of 82. However, they're well exceeding their shrub requirement. 209 shrubs are required, and they're providing more than twice that amount. As well as their landscape area, they're exceeding their landscape area by more than twice. The other variance being requested is specifically to the code requiring landscape islands. This is sort of a paraphrase of the code, but in a sense it says, all projects with parking areas greater than 100 spaces shall contain at least 1 landscape planter for every 10 parking spaces provided on the site. So due to the fact that this hotel use requires more than 100 spaces, they do have to provide landscape islands for every 10. So that would actually require the need for 11 landscape islands. So when looking at the site, the landscape islands that I've highlighted there in that purple and yellow color are most definitely landscape islands in terms of the fact that they're mid-row, and it's meeting the intent of what a landscape island is supposed to accomplish in terms of providing a relief to a long stream of parking to provide shade. We would also argue that the end caps are also probably landscape islands. The code is not clear on that. It just provides a minimum dimension, which these are all meeting. But we feel that they actually do probably have 11 islands, even though those are technically like end caps. Maybe a peninsula instead of an island. However, the reason why we are carrying this forward as a variance is because the spacing of the islands aren't accommodated in a way where you have 1 per every 10 spaces. What you have is 14 spaces between islands along the rear of the site to the north. And then along the west boundary, you have 11 spaces, so it's close, but it doesn't quite meet it. And then the same is true along the south part of the site with those parking spaces perpendicular to Florence, as well as the area just immediately next to the building, you have 15. The areas that I've not indicated with the parking number meets it. When reviewing variances to the landscape code, the criteria states that the Planning Commission can modify or vary the strict provisions of the landscape section where there exists extraordinary conditions or other circumstances not provided for. It also goes on to say that Planning Commission may grant variances in such a manner and to such an extent as is deemed appropriate to maintain the public interest and to maintain the purpose and the intent of the landscape section of the code. The applicant maintains that for the project to be feasible, they need the 92 rooms. They really weren't comfortable with reducing the room count in order for the project to be viable. But because our parking code needs to be met, and that many rooms prompts over 100 spaces, thus prompts the need for the parking islands, and also the landscape ratio is proportional to the number of parking spaces, so therein lies the issue. When staff analyzed the request, though, we got a little bit more thorough with the analysis, and we determined that the public interest is not compromised and the purpose and the intent of the code is maintained due to the fact that the shortfall is offset by the fact that the majority of the trees that they are proposing are going to be 24-inch box in size. Also, the shrubs that are being proposed exceed that which is required by 241%. The open space being provided is 149% more than the minimum allowed. And the landscape frontage, the area most viewed by the public and the area that we'd be most sensitive about in terms of dressing up, actually exceeds the tree count in that area because there's supposed to be 1 tree per every 30 feet. And with the width as it is, it would necessitate 10 trees. In that area, they're actually providing 13. And that's also the area that's probably the most dense with shrubs. Staff, therefore, does recommend that Planning Commission approve DSA 20-00115, allowing for 33 trees where 82 are required, as well as a reduced placement and number of landscape islands as required by code. As far as the public notification process is concerned, we did meet all of the requirements per code. We did receive a number of inquiries as a result of the public notification. The third inquiry that I received yesterday basically was a question, which was, why couldn't there be more trees accommodated at the rear and front of the lot? So with regard to the front of the lot, I think they're challenged by the fact that that's probably the area where the most utilities are cutting through. So there's probably really not an opportunity to add any more. And plus 10 would be the minimum there based on the 1 tree per 30 feet. And that sort of helps ensure the viability for the tree to not be closer than 30 feet. However, when looking at the rear, that would be sort of the same rule where there's the potential maybe to have 10 trees along the rear, yet there's only 6. It's somewhat encumbered by the fact that there's the trash dumpster to the far right. City sanitation would not allow a tree to be any closer to the trash dumpster than where that one sits. But in looking at the site, there may be a potential to add a couple of trees there nonetheless. However, I'm comfortable with the 33 trees that they're proposing. They do have to provide a final landscape plan, which can be administratively approved. So there is an opportunity to sort of adjust and add more that would be optimal. However, what this variance would be is to allow for a minimum of the 33. Staff recommends that Planning Commission approve the 2 items, DSA 20-00089 and 00115, subject to the one condition associated with the major site plan. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Member McBride.
I've got a question that's brought up about, when I drove through Clean Freak this week, I looked over and saw this huge, huge water retention basin sitting right in the middle of that project. What happens with all the water that goes into that water retention basin?
So this plan, Commissioner McBride probably illustrates it the best. If you notice just north of the building, behind the building there, there's some shading that Joe's moving the mouse to help sort of identify where I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's where the retention basin more or less currently sits, and that's going to be put underground.
Like the one that, what is it, the housing, or, next to the preschool where they're putting the houses, not houses, but the apartments, affordable housing, something similar to that.
Yeah.
That is a retention mechanism that is able to be considered by our city engineering. I think also Boston's Pizza has underground retention. It's a space-saving mechanism because then you can double up on your use. You can put your parking area over the drainage retention.
Okay, and that is part of this project, though? That's a requirement of this project?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Member Dugan.
Mr. Chairman.
I'll get to you in a second. Member Snyder.
Thank you, sir.
I just got one question. They're showing the driveway where you go behind the Circle K, and you got that X there, the little, is that a stop sign? But is that only where one car can get through at a time, or is that's a very narrow driveway? What I'm saying is there something blocking that, or only one car can come in at a time or go out?
Joe, would you mind moving the slide back to?
It's just calling out a detail.
Well, it's not a stop sign, that's just a marker number.
The
That number
detail on
9.
the plans. It's just a reference number.
Well, now.
So it's a double
I
driveway.
did before. No problem. I'll go to that slide. Is this helpful, or was there a slide prior to this that you were referring to?
Yeah, so it's a double driveway. I mean, for 2 cars can meet there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's to denote two-way traffic.
Got it.
Any other questions for staff? Member Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Gagliardi, you can leave that slide up because my question is, we've been asking about this issue for most of the projects tonight. Are those right in, right out only on Florence Boulevard?
Commissioner Snyder, not at this time.
Well, you moved the westerly driveway or entrance point, entrance exit point, further to the east to avoid conflict with Clean Creek. Yet, if you've got right in, right out on both of those driveways, you've got some conflicts, and you're setting up, I think, some hazardous things. I would really like our crack traffic engineer and staff to seriously consider whether those are full access or right in, right out.
Thank you, Member
Well,
Schneider.
this is Dwayne. I would like to say that a hotel like this doesn't generate a huge amount of traffic. So it didn't generate enough traffic to even meet our requirements for traffic impact analysis, although we did work together on looking at traffic. So in my opinion, I think it'll work just fine.
Well, sir, sometimes we agree to disagree.
Don't we definitely do that?
All right. Any other questions for staff?
Mr. Chairman, my comment earlier about being all about trees, I was the one that called about the trees, looking at that layout, and I appreciate your comments, James, and I hope to make that motion, adding in your suggestion.
Adding in his suggestion.
I'll show you when you get to the
Okay.
motion.
That's fair.
Oh, do you need to, I'm sorry, I stopped. Commissioner Benedict, are you referring to the discussion that I had that there's likely potential to add a couple of more trees to the rear area?
Yes, sir.
How many trees are they short?
A lot.
Couldn't remember. Okay. Thank you. We'll get to that, I'm assuming, later.
Motion.
Huh?
We'll get to, when we get to the motion.
All right.
Chairman.
Questions for staff? Great, thank you. At this time, do we have an applicant that was jumping on and off, I think? We got him? Is he on?
Yes, I'm here. How you doing? This is Nick Barbaria.
Fantastic. We'd like to give you the opportunity to share some information with us, maybe field some questions.
Name and address, maybe?
No, I think Jim did a good job of explaining our project, so I'd be happy to address any questions or concerns that you guys have.
You want him to give his name and address? It's on his application. He said he was Nick, right?
Yeah, Nick Barbaria, address 4400 North Scottsdale Road, Scottsdale, Arizona.
Okay, sorry, my commit. Great. Any questions for the applicant?
Why don't I ask my question about the trees particularly? Is it possible to add a few more trees in the back? I certainly appreciate your bit limited space, and appreciate what you've done for adding those trees. Our neighbor big cities are going through big battles trying to add trees to cut down on their heat island effect, and it's a good chance for us to get ahead. And it just looks to me like that wall might be able to take some more. Sure like to hear your comments about that north
Yes,
wall.
we do have a 6-foot wall on the north boundary of the parcel. And, my concern as the trees mature, they're going to, grow over the wall And to maintain those trees, we'd have to encroach on the northerly parcel to trim them. So we've tried to kind of meet in the middle to dress up the front, the right of way, the main, area where the city and the people are going to see. The building is going to cover, pretty much all of the trees from Florence Boulevard. So until there's some development on the, back end there, really not going to be visible from the street.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right. Is there anything that you would like to add from your own standpoint?
No, we're excited about our project and to get started here in the near future. And we appreciate everybody's time today, and definitely Jim, helping us throughout the process. It's a very difficult site to design because of the setbacks, but we've been able to, make it work. I think Circle K, Clean Freak, everybody's excited. Our neighbors are excited about the development, and we certainly are too.
Great, thank you, and thank you for joining us this evening. So with that, I will open it up to the public portion. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this agenda item?
When you get to the Zoom section, let me know.
That's you. You're the only one left, John.
I'm not watching the meeting on television today, so I apologize. I can't see what's going on
That's
in the
fair.
meeting. John McGuire, 1748 North St. Francis. I'm obviously, is pretty typical of me, very excited about this project coming to town. I understand the concerns of Commissioner Snyder, which is not always something that we agree on, but that particular area of Florence Boulevard is always scary for me, coming in and out of the Cracker Barrel and Burger King and all that. But I'm going to tie this to a couple of the other items we've spoken about tonight. My suggestion to fix it is medians. And I don't know how much the public's going to love that. But other than that, I also take traffic engineer Titel's comments that we're talking about a couple hundred trips a day here, of which many of them are going to likely wish to go to the traffic light. Hopefully the hotel can put some suggestion signs or something to help steer people towards the Camino Mercado light to avoid those left out conflicts, and that'll even minimize it more. So definitely not something I would suggest the project to be held up over, and I'm excited they're coming. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. Just to be clear, is there anybody else from the public that would like to speak? Hearing none, I'll close the public portion, bring it back to the commission.
Motion to approve DSA 20000089 with the condition.
Second.
Motion and second, any discussion? Hearing none. Linda, will you call the roll?
Member Benedict?
Yes.
Member Estrada?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Yes.
Chairman Miller?
Yes. Motion approved.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve DSA-20-00115 landscape variance, allowing for 33 trees where 82 are required.
I'll second it. And I'll request from my motion to add the allowing for a minimum of 33 trees.
I'll go along with that. It's already in there.
Okay.
part of his motion, part of our motion.
Wait, did you amend his motion?
No, I seconded and requested him to add it to his. Don't get too hung up.
You know, the attorney's gonna jump on here and yell at me. I'm telling you right now. He was already clicking the unmute button to yell at me. All right. So, I'm gonna jump in here and then I'll let the attorney speak to me afterwards. So I have a motion for the landscape variance allowing for a minimum of 33 trees.
Thank you, sir.
Member Dugan, is that correct?
Yes.
And I have a second on that motion.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, just clarification that includes, the variance includes reducing the number of landscape islands.
Yes.
So technically, there's a reduction there as well.
Yes.
Okay.
Is that correct? My motion and second?
Yes.
Yes, they agreed with that. They just didn't want to read it all.
I understand.
Okay. No discussion? Linda, will you please call the roll?
Member Benedict?
Yes.
Member Estrada?
Yes.
Member Snyder?
Aye.
Member Dugan?
Yes.
Member Tucker?
Yes.
Vice Chairman McBride?
Yes.
Chairman Miller?
Yes. Motion approved. Congratulations. Good luck to you guys. Next agenda.
Thank you
item.
all.
Reports by the planning director.
We approved 2 minor amendments to major site plans administratively since your last meeting. Both were in our airport industrial park. One for Domino auto repair for some exterior storage, the addition of a screened area for outdoor storage. The other was for an addition to the ACO buildings. And although that building addition was rather large at 18,000 square feet, it was fairly small in relation to their overall square footage. So it was a fairly small addition, like 5% or so to their total square footage, which is why we processed it as a minor amendment. So both of those were approved. City Council did approve the designation of the Kiwanis sign at Carmacknair Park as a historic landmark sign per your recommendation. And I've attached the monthly reports. You might note that we had a very strong building permit month in July for single-family homes with 160 permits for July. So with that, concludes my report.
Thank you, Director.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Who seconded?
Estrada. Adjourn. I forgot my gavel on this.